There's a pattern in history that has destroyed 3 global superpowers in the last 500 years, and right now, in 2025, the United States is walking that same path, step by step, choice by choice. Like we're reciting the same script that ended in disaster every single time before. Why does this happen? Because power makes you deaf. Wealth makes you numb, and momentum feels like immortality until it isn't. In 1590, Spain looked untouchable, the richest empire on earth. Galleons heavy with bullion, half the world's gold and silver under their seal, their armies dominated Europe. Their currency was accepted everywhere without a second glance. Confidence felt infinite, then time did its work. Within 80 years, bankruptcy. The flow of silver could not cover the promises. Prestige turned into paperwork. A second-rate power, and it never recovered. Do you see the shift? From abundance to obligation, from certainty to pleading. Jump to 1914. Britain ruled the largest empire in human history. The map was their resume. The sun never set on British territory. The pound sterling was the reserve currency of the world. Safety, stability, trust. Then the clock started accelerating. Within 40 years, the empire was gone. The currency cracked, power slipped through open fingers. They became America's junior partner, not from a single defeat, but from compounding pressure. The kind you ignore because the headlines still look calm. Then 1991. The Soviet Union stood as the other superpower. Nuclear weapons. Global influence. Satellites circling the globe. A machine built to project control. It did not die on a battlefield. It ceased to exist in 900 days. Not from invasion, from economic implosion. The money stopped making sense. Factories stood still. Shelves went empty. The map changed because the math broke. 3 times, 3 superpowers, 3 complete collapses, all following the same sequence. Power expands, costs rise, promises multiply, debts deepen. Confidence holds until it doesn't. And here's what should chill you. The United States has already completed 5 of the 7 stages. We're not approaching the pattern, we're inside it, we're breathing it. This is the story of how empires die. Why they always whisper, we're different. And why the numbers answer, you're not. It's happening faster than anyone wants to admit. Because panic comes late, denial comes first. Before we walk through the pattern, you need to feel what imperial collapse actually is. Not in textbooks, in real life, what it means when a superpower dies. It does not begin with tanks rolling across borders or fleets sinking at sea. It begins with exhaustion, quiet, hidden, economic exhaustion. The empire stretches beyond its ability to support itself. Bases in 150 countries, wars on multiple fronts, promises written in speeches that the balance sheet cannot honor. Debts that compound like a storm you pretend is just rain. At first, decline is invisible. The currency still works, the military still wins battles. The government still makes promises with a straight face. People nod, markets hum, life looks normal. That's the trap. Momentum masks fragility. Success anesthetizes risk. Leaders delay hard choices because delay feels safe. Voters reward it because comfort feels deserved. Greed does the rest. Why tighten belts when the good times seem endless? But underneath the surface, pressure builds. The bill for past victories comes due. Maintenance, not glory, eats the budget. Interest, not investment, eats the future. Trust is the real reserve asset, and it leaks 1 drop at a time. You don't notice the first leak or the second, then fear smells blood. Fear is fast, fear is contagious, and fear does not negotiate. This is how it looks when the end begins. Not with spectacle, with strain. The empire extends, then overextends. The story it tells itself stays heroic. The math turns merciless. Leaders insist the model still works. Citizens believe because the alternative is unthinkable. That's human. We anchor to the last decade and miss the turn in the road. We confuse activity with strength. We call debt strategy and promises policy. We say, just a little more time, and time says, no. Remember Spain, the coffers full, then empty. Remember Britain, the map full, then torn. Remember the Soviet Union, the missiles intact, then irrelevant, different cultures, different ideologies. Same sequence: expansion, burden, denial, shock. Afterward, everyone claims it was obvious. Beforehand, almost no one wants to see. So when you hear that 5 of the 7 stages are already complete, do not shrug. Do not panic. Understand the psychology. Empires die from inside first, from exhaustion masked as strength, from promises piled on promises, from leaders who confuse applause with solvency, from citizens who trade vigilance for comfort. The pattern does not care about pride. It cares about balance sheets, supply lines, and trust. Right now, in 2025, we are not watching a distant history lesson. We are living inside the paragraphs. The currency still spends. The military still wins. The government still speaks in certainties. That's exactly how it looks, just before perception catches up to reality. Then the questions get sharper, the choices get uglier, and the room for error disappears. Why does this happen? Because the cost of being a superpower grows faster than the willingness to pay for it, because fear arrives too late and greed leaves too early. Because every empire believes it is the exception. The pattern says otherwise, the math says otherwise, and history does not bargain. Beneath the surface, the foundation is cracking. You cannot see it in the parades, you cannot hear it in the speeches, but it is there, quiet. Relentless. Resources get misallocated, not by accident, by confidence, by the belief that the bill will never come due. Productive capacity shrinks. Factories stall, skills decay, the best and brightest leave, not out of anger, out of clarity. They feel the shift before the headlines do. Then comes the acceleration. It always comes fast. Allies start hedging. They smile in public and draft contingencies in private. Enemies test boundaries. A ship here, a cyber poke there, a treaty stretched to its limit. Trade partners seek alternatives. Not because they want to, because they have to. Survival forces choices. The reserve currency status erodes, slowly, then suddenly. Why does this happen? Because trust is oxygen. When it thins, everyone gasps. And the advantages that made you powerful flip into vulnerabilities. The same tools, the same systems, now turned against you. Your currency, once demanded by everyone, comes flooding back home, a tide you cannot stop. The world that begged for your paper now sends it back in bulk. Your military, spread across the world, becomes unsustainable. Every outpost drains. Every supply line frays. Every new mission feels heavier than the last. Your promises, once guaranteed by strength, turn into empty words. Not because you changed the words, because the world stopped believing them. This is not theoretical. This is history. Spain, Britain. The Soviet Union, different flags, same pattern. They believed their power was permanent. They overextended militarily. They debased their currency. They refused to accept reality until collapse was already underway. Pride first, pain second, denial all the way through. Do you see the pattern? So let's walk it, not with slogans, with sequence. How it actually unfolded 3 times the exact same way. We begin with Spain. The first global empire, the 1500s to the 1600s, the original blueprint. After Columbus discovered the Americas in 1492, Spain became the first true world power, not regional, global. They conquered the Aztec and Inca empires. They seized the richest gold and silver mines ever discovered, rivers of metal, rivers of confidence. By 1550, Spanish galleons were bringing home 200 tons of silver per year. By 1600, over 400 tons annually. Imagine that flow, year after year. How would that feel? Like the future could never say no. Spain controlled the money supply of Europe. The Spanish real was the global reserve currency. Everyone wanted Spanish silver, kings, merchants, soldiers. It bought loyalty. It bought time. It bought the illusion that discipline was optional. And this is where the pattern always begins. A country that controls the money of the world believes that makes it invincible. Why budget when the mines feel endless? Why reform when the coins never stop clinking? King Philip II, ruling from 1556 to 1598, had more money than any monarch in history, and he spent it on empire. Not a little, all in, stage 1, military overextension. Spain fought wars everywhere simultaneously against the Ottoman Empire in the Mediterranean, against France and Italy, against Protestant rebels in the Netherlands, against England's navy. Wars in the Philippines, wars in the Americas, everywhere at once. What does that do to a nation? It stretches the map, it thins the leadership. It burns the treasury. Men rotate from front to front without rest. Supplies chase ships across oceans. Victories feel hollow because another front ignites the same day. The public hears triumphs, the accountants see deficits. And the ruler thinks one more push will solve it, just one more. Fear creeps in, not panic, not yet. Just a silent question. Can we keep this up? Greed answers first. Of course we can. Look at the silver, look at the fleets, look at the banners, but fear lingers. Because somewhere deep down, everyone knows the truth. When everything depends on more, you are already in danger. That is how it starts. With surplus that dulls prudence. With a currency the world craves. With leaders who confuse cash for capability. With wars that feel necessary and then become normal, stage 1 sets the trap. The bill is coming. It always comes. By 1580, Spain is stretched across 4 continents, 1 crown, 4 fronts, soldiers to feed, ships to supply, forts to garrison. The bills arrive every day. The cost is staggering. Half of Spain's revenue pours into the military. Half. Imagine that. Every second coin gone before it touches the table, and still it isn't enough. The treasury gasps. The ministers shuffle numbers. The empire keeps marching. You can feel the pressure building. Why does this happen? Because power always wants more power, and power is expensive. Stage 2, currency debasement. Taxes cannot cover the burn rate. The Spanish crown can't pay with taxes alone, so they reach for the oldest lever. They do what failing empires always do. They debase the currency, quietly at first. They start mixing copper into silver coins. The mint keeps the face value. The metal inside tells a different story. A coin meant to be pure silver becomes 50% copper. Then 75% copper. Hold it. It looks the same. It does not feel the same. The ring is dull. The weight is off. The truth is inside the metal. On paper, nothing changes. In reality, everything changes. The face value stays the same. The real value plunges. By 1600, Spanish silver coins contain barely any silver. Merchants stop accepting them at face value. They test the coins. They squint. They haggle. Trust breaks down. Prices jump to chase disappearing value. Inflation explodes, and with inflation comes fear. People rush to spend bad money before it gets worse. They hoard real value. They unload the rest. Do you see the pattern? Confidence dies first. The math dies next. Stage 3, debt spiral. When debasement does not solve the gap, you borrow. Spain borrows constantly. From Italian bankers, from German bankers, from anyone who will lend. One loan to pay another. One promise stacked onto the last promise. By 1557, less than 20 years into Philip's reign, the music stops. Spain declares bankruptcy. They default. They restructure. They go right back to borrowing. Then it happens again in 1560, again in 1575, again in 1596. 4 bankruptcies in 40 years. 4. Each time the same ritual. Speeches about reform, vows to be prudent. Then the pattern returns, borrow. Spend, repeat. Why? Because habits are stronger than intentions. Because easy money feels easier than hard choices. Debt changes behavior. It buys time, it steals time, it dulls the pain today and multiplies it tomorrow. You start believing the next influx will save you. You ignore the bill under the plate. You forget that compounding works for you when you invest and against you when you owe. Panic flickers, then fades under fresh credit, until panic becomes policy. Stage 4, loss of productive capacity. Here's what most people miss about Spain's collapse. They had all the gold and silver in the world, and it destroyed them. Not because gold and silver are bad, because when money feels unlimited, discipline dies. When cash pours in, the urge to build dries up. Why grow food when you can import it? Why build ships when you can buy them? Why innovate when you can just spend? The quick fix beats the long grind. The checkbook beats the workshop. The Spanish nobility considers work beneath them. Status becomes consumption. Labor becomes shame. Manufacturing declines. Agriculture stagnates. Workshops go quiet. Fields go thin. The muscle of the economy atrophies from disuse. All that wealth, it flows outward. Imports surge. The gold and silver from the Americas moves in, then rushes straight back out. It pays for French wine, for Italian silk, for Dutch goods. Spain becomes a conduit, a pipe. Wealth flows through, but none of it stays. The country looks rich. It feels rich. It is not rich. Real wealth is what you can make, not what you can trade today for what someone else made yesterday. Do you see the trap? When you import the good life, you export your future. By 1600, Spain is producing almost nothing. Almost nothing. The economy is entirely dependent on imports, entirely dependent on silver to pay for everything. Dependency breeds fragility. One shock and the whole structure wobbles. And when these silver mines begin to deplete, when production drops, the entire system collapses. The lifeline snaps. The illusion ends. The markets stop pretending. Debased coins buy less. Lenders grow wary. Prices run. Stores empty. Panic has the last word. Fear, greed, panic. They are not just the emotions of traders. They are the emotions of empires. Greed for reach. Fear of retreat, panic when the math finally arrives. The pattern is brutal and simple. Overspend, debase, borrow, default, deindustrialize, collapse. It is not fate, it is behavior, and behavior compounds. Ask yourself, in your own portfolio, do you chase the easy coin or build the durable engine? Do you buy the shiny thing or the cash flow? Are you importing your returns from luck or producing them with discipline? Spain's story is not about metal, it is about choices. Spend beyond means. Hide the gap with tricks. Promise reforms. Delay the pain. Let your productive core wither while the imports sparkle. Then watch the bill arrive. Always it arrives. The lesson is cold, and it is clear. Money without production is a mirage. Trust without discipline is a bubble, and an empire without a working heart is only a conduit waiting to be emptied. Stage 5, social decay. The economy stumbles, then cracks. Crime surges. Fear spreads. Beggars crowd the streets of Madrid. Not a few. Crowds, hands out, eyes down. The mood turns gray. Productive citizens leave. The shopkeeper who hired apprentices, gone. The craftsman who trained his sons, gone. The merchant with ideas, also gone. The best minds look north, to France, to England, to the Netherlands. Places building, creating, growing. Where capital meets talent, where effort still compounds. What stays behind? Bureaucrats, soldiers, priests, forms, uniforms, sermons, meetings, and rituals. No one building new wealth, everyone living off old wealth. Consumption without creation. The math does not work. You can feel it, a society eating its seed corn. By 1640, Spain loses Portugal, a piece of the heart. By 1650, they lose the Netherlands, their richest territory, the engine of trade gone, the tax base thinned, the pride wounded. Do you see the pattern? First the brain drain, then the revenue drain, then the power drain. By 1700, the Spanish Empire is a shell. Impressive on maps, hollow in ledgers, big borders, empty granaries, still large on paper, economically dead in practice. They go from the world's superpower to a secondary power in less than a century. No rebound, no real second act. Momentum breaks, confidence fades. Recovery never comes. Spain today is a regional European country. Pleasant, cultured, warm plazas, great food, but irrelevant on the world stage. The descendants of the conquistadors are a tourist destination now. Souvenirs where gold once flowed, photos where fleets once sailed. That is what imperial collapse looks like. Slow, then sudden, then settled. Now, jump forward 300 years, Britain, the 1900s. The empire where the sun never set, red on the map from horizon to horizon, steamers in every port, flags on every coast, it felt permanent. How could it not? At its peak, Britain controls 25% of the world's land surface, 400 million subjects. A quarter of the planet under one crown, distance shrinks. Telegraph lines hum, railways knit continents, the center holds, or so they think. The pound sterling is the global reserve currency, the ultimate promise. Every major trade contract is denominated in pounds. Every central bank holds British bonds, safe paper, safe yield, safe story. London is the financial center of the world, the city of deals, of coffeehouse whispers, of gold in quiet vaults and prices set with a nod. Money believes in Britain. Belief itself becomes collateral. And just like Spain 300 years earlier, they believe it is permanent. How could it end? The habits feel like laws. But the pattern is already in motion. Pride dulls caution. Comfort masks risk. Why does this happen? Because success writes a lullaby. Stage 1. Military overextension. By 1900, Britain has commitments everywhere. India, Africa, the Middle East, China, the Pacific, the Caribbean. Garrisons in heat and snow, harbors to protect, rail lines to secure. They must defend territory on 6 continents, every ocean a frontier. Every frontier a liability. The bill grows, the empire's payroll is the globe. Then the shock. World War I starts in 1914. A decision point. Stay neutral and let Europe tear itself apart? Or jump in and spend everything to win? Honor pulls one way. Alliances pull harder. Pride seals it. They choose to fight. The price is brutal. World War I cost Britain over $40 billion. That is $1 trillion in today's money. Read that again. 1 trillion. Years of surplus erased in a handful of seasons. They borrow from everyone, mostly from the United States. The center of credit moves with the ink. By 1918, Britain owes America billions. The creditor becomes the debtor. The image flips. The world notices, but they have won the war. The flag still flies. They keep the empire. On paper, nothing has changed. In reality, everything has. They think they can rebuild, open the markets, restart the ships, light the factories, pretend the pattern is not the pattern. Do you see the rhyme? First comes reach, then the strain, then the choice, then the debt. It feels heroic in the moment, it feels inevitable in hindsight, and it always costs more than anyone wants to admit. They were wrong. Stage 2, currency debasement. The pound sterling was supposed to be backed by gold, solid, unbreakable. But war drains more than lives. It drains coffers. Britain shipped gold to America to pay for weapons, food, supplies, bar by bar. Promise by promise. By 1920, Britain's gold reserves were half of what they had been in 1914. Half. Do you feel that? The floor already cracking, and yet they tried to hold the line. Pride does that. Habit does that. They went back on the gold standard at the pre-war rate in 1925. Same old price, same old story. Why? Because letting go feels like failure. Because leaders fear the headline more than the outcome. Anchoring to the past is easier than facing the present. But the pound was overvalued, way over. British exports suddenly looked expensive. Too expensive. A buyer in another country looks at the price, shakes his head, chooses someone else. Manufacturing stalls, orders dry up. Unemployment rises. Families wait by silent phones. Fear creeps in. To defend the currency, the government keeps interest rates high. Higher. Higher still. Hold the pound, they said. Hold the illusion. But high rates crush borrowers. Businesses delay investments. Households cut spending. The economy suffocates. Do you see the pattern? Save the symbol, sacrifice the system. By 1931, they could not hold it anymore. The dam broke. Britain abandoned the gold standard. Overnight, the pound lost 25% of its value. Think about that number. A quarter of your savings gone while you sleep. Panic? Of course. The so-called global reserve currency had just admitted it could not keep its promises. Trust, once spent, rarely snaps back. Stage 3, debt spiral. Britain never recovered from the debt of the First World War. The weight stayed, the interest compounded. Then the Second World War started, another $120 billion in costs. More borrowing from America, more promises traded for time. Politicians said, we will grow our way out. Voters hoped. Investors watched the math. By 1945, Britain owed the United States and Canada over $30 billion more than Britain's entire GDP. Read that again? More than the whole economy produced. The war was won, but the empire finished. Victory in battle does not erase the ledger. The bill still arrives. You can win and still lose. They could not defend the empire anymore, could not afford it, could not maintain it. And markets know when a player is over-leveraged. The whispers start. The exit doors look smaller than they are. Fear does the rest. Stage 4. Loss of empire. In 1947, Britain gave up India, the crown jewel. The engine of wealth for 200 years, gone. That is not a map change. That is a psyche change. An identity cut out of the frame. Over the next 20 years, the rest slipped away. Africa, the Middle East, Southeast Asia, the Caribbean, territory by territory, flag by flag. Once you lose the cash flows, you lose the margin of error. Once you lose the aura, you lose the premium. By 1970, the British Empire lived only in history books. Nostalgia does not pay interest. Memory does not settle accounts. Stage 5. Currency collapse. The pound kept falling, relentless. In 1940, 1 pound equaled $403. By 1950, 280. By 1970, 240. The trend told the story. Confidence leaked. Purchasing power bled. The world repriced what Britain was and what Britain would be. A global reserve currency became a regional currency. That is the quiet funeral, not a crash. A long, cold slide, day after day, year after year. People adapt. They tell themselves it is fine. They talk about tradition. They point to old victories, but the exchange rate does not care about pride. It measures trust. It measures choices made long ago. Britain tried to keep the theater going. Permanent seat on the United Nations Security Council. Nuclear weapons. A special relationship with America. The trappings of power stayed on stage. The substance had left the building. Markets saw through it. Savers felt it. Importers lived it. This is how it happens. First, the promise stretches. Then it snaps. Currency debasement, an overvalued peg, a suffocated economy, a forced devaluation. A debt spiral that eats policy options, then the empire unwinds. The currency keeps falling because the story behind it has changed. Why does this matter to you? Because every investor fights the same emotions. Denial when the facts shift. Hope when the odds worsen. Panic when the break finally comes. The British leaders were not fools. They were human. They clung to the old rate because it felt safe. They defended the pound because it symbolized status. They borrowed because the alternative was pain today, and the bill came tomorrow. Do you see the pattern? Symbols over systems, pride over price, delay over decision. The market does not punish mistakes. It punishes refusal to correct them. Once the world stops believing you can keep your promises, every choice gets worse. Each rescue costs more. Each defense hurts more. Until you stop defending. The empire was gone, and it never came back. Now look at the most recent example. The Soviet Union from 1945 to 1991. A superpower is born from the fire of war. Nuclear weapons. Armies across Eastern Europe. Rockets in the sky. A system that claimed it would outlast everything. Communism would bury capitalism. That was the promise. That was the chant. For nearly half a century, they fought for prestige, for status, for the right to say, "We won." More tanks. More missiles, more men in uniform, a chess match against America, move for move. But under the steel and parades, the foundation cracked. Pride shouted, the numbers whispered. First, military overextension. The Soviet state spent between 15 and 20% of its entire economy on the military. Think about that. Every fifth ruble, and sometimes more, burned on tanks, ships, and war plans. Triple America's share. Why? Because they had to match everything. American technology, American reach, American alliances. Even when their economy was only a fraction of America's size, the logic became a trap. If Washington had a position, Moscow needed one too. Afghanistan drained them. Allies and clients pulled at them, propping up Cuba, supporting Syria, Vietnam, North Korea, Angola, Ethiopia. Everywhere influence met influence, the bill grew. Who pays that bill? The future does. Overextension is not a strategy. It is a slow surrender disguised as strength. Second, economic stagnation. Growth stalled in the 1970s and never truly returned. Oil money kept the lights on. Everything else flickered. Factories produced goods nobody wanted. Farms missed harvests they should have made. Technology slipped decades behind. Imagine watching the world speed forward while you stand frozen. By the 1980s, the Soviet Union imported grain. Grain. In a land blessed with vast, rich soil. Why does this happen? Because central planning kills feedback. Because innovation suffocates under control. Because when there is no upside for excellence, people stop trying. Incentives are oxygen. Take it away, and the system holds its breath. Then it turns blue. Third, the currency problem. The ruble was not a currency the world trusted. You could not freely exchange it. Even Soviet citizens doubted it. When they could, they reached for dollars. That tells you everything. Confidence is currency. Without it, paper is just paper. The state needed foreign goods, but foreign sellers did not want rubles, so Moscow paid with gold and oil. Real assets for real goods. That works when oil is high and the vaults are full. But by 1985, oil prices dropped. Gold reserves thinned, the cupboard opened, and the shelves were bare. Running out of real money is not a metaphor. It is the moment you cannot pretend anymore. Fourth, the loss of empire. In 1989, the Berlin Wall fell. The symbols shattered. Eastern Europe walked away. Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Romania, East Germany, gone in a single year. Strategic depth vanished. Influence evaporated. The center could not hold the rim. The Soviet government watched and could not stop it. Why? Because legitimacy had died long before the concrete cracked. Because when the story people tell themselves no longer matches what they feel, walls fall in the mind first and then in the street. Do you see the pattern? Overreach born from pride, stagnation masked by illusions, a currency nobody trusts, and then collapse. This is not just geopolitics, it is psychology, fear of falling behind, the vanity of keeping up, the denial that yesterday's tools no longer work. Leaders doubled down because retreat felt like defeat. They spent more to prove they were strong, they controlled more to prove they were right. But the tighter the grip, the faster the power slipped through. What does this teach? Strength without a healthy economy is theater. Growth without incentives is a myth. Money without trust is a costume. And an empire without belief is a shell. The Soviet Union looked unbreakable from a distance. Up close, it was fragile. The lesson is simple. What breaks you is not always the blow. It is the rot you ignore while you polish the armor. They were broke. Stage 5, complete collapse. On December 26, 1991, the Soviet Union ceased to exist. 900 days from the Berlin Wall to total dissolution. No war. No invasion, just economic implosion. Paychecks stopped. Orders meant nothing. The ruble became a rumor. The military could not be paid. The government could not function. A superpower with 30,000 nuclear weapons fell to pieces from within, not from tanks, from spreadsheets. from math that no longer added up. How does a giant fall? The same way empires always fall: overextension, currency failure, debt, loss of empire, collapse. The pattern repeats again and again. You know this story. You have seen echoes of it before. Spain, Britain, the USSR, different flags. Same gravity. Here's what should keep you awake at night. The United States is walking the same path, step by step, stage by stage. You do not need a crystal ball. You need a mirror. Stage 1, military overextension. The United States has more than 750 military bases spread across 80 countries, troops in 150 countries. A pledge to defend Europe through NATO, pledges to defend Japan, South Korea, the Philippines, ongoing fights in the Middle East, counter China, counter Russia, hold the line everywhere, all at once. Our military budget is $850 billion per year. More than the next 10 countries combined, and still it is not enough. We are stretched thin, equipment is aging, recruitment is falling. Maintenance lags, the mission list grows, the roster shrinks. Ask yourself, if China moves on Taiwan, if Russia pushes into NATO territory, if Iran closes the Persian Gulf, can we answer all three calls at the same time on three fronts in three theaters? With finite ships, planes, people, and money? You know the answer. That is overextension, just like Spain, just like Britain, just like the USSR. Check stage 2, currency debasement. In 1971, President Nixon closed the gold window. The dollar left its anchor. It became pure fiat. From that moment, restraint depended on discipline. Discipline is hard. Presses are easy. Since 2000, the money supply has grown by roughly 400%. Since 2020, we have printed over $6 trillion. Liquidity washed over everything. Markets cheered, assets popped, but money is not value. It is a claim on value. And when claims multiply faster than output, each claim buys less. The dollar has lost 98% of its purchasing power since 1971, not by shaving silver coins. Not by mixing copper into the metal, by something cleaner, quiet. Just numbers on a screen, new dollars created, old dollars diluted. The mechanism changes. The outcome does not. Your savings buy less. Your time buys less. Debasement, check. Stage 3, the debt spiral. The United States owes $36 trillion. That is about 120% of total output. Debt no longer funds the future. It mortgages it. Interest does not sleep. Interest does not care. Interest payments alone are racing toward $1 trillion per year. More than we spend on defense. Think about that. We pay more to stand still than to stand guard. Deficits every single year, even in good times. Even in a growing economy, $1.8 trillion in 2024. Red ink as far as the eye can see. Borrow to spend, spend to grow. Grow to borrow, round and round until the cost of money becomes the story, until the interest bill eats the budget. Until choices vanish and cuts are forced, not chosen. Why does this happen? Fear and greed, pride and denial. Leaders promise, voters hope. Markets enable. It feels fine until it does not. Then panic replaces patience. Then the math calls in its debt. The pattern tightens. Overextension. Debasement. Debt. Loss of control. Collapse. Do you see the pattern? Do you feel the slope under your feet? Empires do not fall in one day. They fall in stages, quietly at first, then all at once. The lesson is not abstract. It is practical. If you carry more weight than you can lift, something breaks. If you print faster than you produce, something breaks. If you borrow more than you can pay, something breaks. The map changes, the currency changes, the headlines change, the laws of arithmetic do not. In peacetime, the lie is gentle. We borrow to pay interest on what we already borrowed. We call it stability. We call it policy, but it is a spiral. A debt spiral. The math is cold. The compounding is relentless. You feel safe because nothing explodes today. You roll the debt. You refinance the promise. You push the pain forward and hope growth will outrun the bill. That hope is the drug. It keeps voters calm. It keeps markets lulled. It keeps leaders in office until it doesn't. Every empire tells itself it is immune. Every generation believes its cleverness can outwit arithmetic. Spain told itself that while it defaulted 4 times. Britain told itself that while it borrowed until the structure buckled. The USSR believed in its own myth until one day it ran out of money. Same movie, new costumes. Why does this happen? Because incentives are stronger than warnings. Because fear of short-term pain overrides respect for long-term reality. Because the crowd wants comfort now. And leaders give the crowd what it wants. Stage 4, loss of productive capacity. This is where the engine sputters. The dashboard still lights up. The music still plays, but the pistons are missing. America barely makes things anymore. We design, we finance, we market, we consume, but we do not produce at scale. The factory lights that once burned through the night, dark. The apprentices who learned on the line, gone. The pride of building something tangible faded into PowerPoints and service contracts. We shipped the muscle out. China, Mexico, Vietnam. That was the bargain. Cheaper inputs, better margins, higher stock prices. You could feel the greed dressed up as efficiency. It looked rational. It felt modern, but each move hollowed the core. And once you hollow the core, resilience dies quietly. You only notice when something breaks. Look at the trade line. We import roughly $800 billion more than we export every year. Read that again. That is dependence. Measured in dollars and ships, medicine, electronics, steel, even military components, the very things you need when times turn. They live elsewhere now. The supply chain is a long, fragile thread. One tug, one shock, one showdown, and the shelves remind you how exposed you are. Spain lived this before. Silver poured in, pride swelled, and production withered. Imports replaced craft. Money flowed out as fast as it arrived, and when the flow slowed, the mask fell. Today, dollars flow out while imports flow in. Different metal, same pattern. Do you see it? When the money stops flowing, dependence becomes danger. That is the hinge in the story. That is where systems snap. Stage 5, social decay. You can measure it in headlines, but you feel it in your gut. Trust in institutions sits at lows that used to be unthinkable. People roll their eyes at official data. They assume the worst about those in charge. The benefit of the doubt is gone. Crime rises, not everywhere, not always, but enough to change how people walk at night. Enough to change where families move. Homelessness explodes. You see tents under bridges and on sidewalks that once felt safe. You look away, then look back because it is impossible to ignore. Drug overdoses take 100,000 American lives every year. That number is not just a number. It is empty seats at dinner tables. It is birthdays that never happen. It is promise erased by chemistry and despair. The best and the brightest, some leave, some check out, some decide the game is rigged and step aside. Fertility falls, couples delay, or say no. That is a quiet vote. A vote that says, we do not trust the future. Politics turns into a cage match. All heat, no light. You can't agree on anything. You can't fix anything. You can't even build a bridge without a fight that lasts longer than the project itself. The signs multiply. People pretend it is fine because pretending is easier than admitting rot. But it is not fine. You know it. You feel it. We are at stage 5 of 7. Sit with that, not at the end, but not at the beginning. The USSR reached stage 5 before it shattered. Britain reached stage 5 before its role collapsed. Spain took longer to unravel, but the direction was the same. The names change. The logic does not. First the debt, then the hollowing out, then the social fabric phrase, then the world shifts away from your currency. Then the floor gives way. Stage 6 is loss of reserve currency status. This one hides in plain sight. It starts with whispers. Allies diversify a little, not because they hate you, because they hedge. Trade finds other currencies. The dollar still matters. But it is no longer the only seat at the table. And when no one needs to hold as many dollars, those dollars come home. They do not arrive politely. They flood. Prices feel it. Assets feel it. Your past borrowing shows up as present tension. Are we seeing it begin? Look closely. BRICS nations sketch alternatives, not finished, not dominant, but moving. Central banks buy gold quietly, steadily. They do not issue press releases about trust. They show you what they trust by what they store. China and Russia settle trade in yuan and rubles. Not for show, for function. Saudi Arabia accepts yuan for oil. That is not a headline to scroll past. That is a crack in a pillar. One crack does not fell the temple. A network of cracks does. You may ask, why would partners shift away now? Because they read history too. They watch sanctions freeze assets. They watch politics spill into payments. They saw what happens when your savings sit in someone else's jurisdiction. So they diversify. A little at first, then a little more. The trend is the tell. The direction is what matters. Stage 7 is collapse, not drift, not gentle decline, a break. Confidence shatters and the system with it. The Soviet Union went from superpower to non-existent in 900 days. Think about that pace. Less than 3 years from unshakable to gone. That is what sudden looks like. One day, the institutions hum. The next day, they do not. It feels impossible until it is inevitable. Then it feels obvious in hindsight. This is not prophecy. It is pattern. You can ignore the pattern. Or you can read it. The debt spiral sedates you. The loss of production weakens you. The social decay divides you. The reserve currency shift isolates you. The collapse shocks you. That is the sequence. That is the road. Where are we now? Deep in the middle. The map says stage 5. The road ahead is not set in stone, but momentum is real. Incentives are real. Human nature is real. Fear, greed, panic. They are the invisible hands that push the timeline forward. Politicians stall. Voters demand comfort. Investors chase yield. Then they stampede for exits at the same time. We have seen this before. Many times, different flags. Same endgame, so you watch for the tells. You listen for the language of hedging and denial. You pay attention when the strong act like the cautious. You remember that systems fail slow, then fast. You remember that the last calm is often the most convincing. And you do not lie to yourself about where we stand, not at the end, not at the start, deep in the sequence. And the sequence, if unbroken, ends the same way it always does. Britain lost an empire in 20 years. Spain took longer. The destination was the same. When the reserve currency cracks, when the debt tower sways, when the military can't be funded by real output, it doesn't glide down. It snaps. Fast. Violent. People who swore it could never happen to them learn the oldest rule in history. It can. It does. 3 empires trace this arc. Spain. Britain. The Soviet Union. Each told itself a flattering story. We are unique. We are chosen. The rules bend for us. They didn't. Not once. Listen to what we're telling ourselves now. We're different. We have technology. We have the dollar. We're America. But patterns don't care. Math doesn't care. Narratives beg. Math says no. You cannot spend beyond your means forever. Not as a household. Not as a country. You cannot run an empire without productive muscle, without factories that hum, without supply chains that actually deliver. You cannot dilute your currency without reaction. Trust breaks, prices shift, behavior changes. You cannot dodge stage 6 and stage 7 once you've marched through 1 through 5. The sequence is locked. The only variable is time. Maybe we have 10 years, maybe 5, maybe less. That's the hard part. Timing is a fog, but direction is a wall. The pattern points one way. Collapse. What does it look like from the inside? You'll feel it before you fully see it. At first, the noise is soothing. Experts say it's temporary, just a blip. You want to believe them, so you hold your bonds, you hold your cash, then the screens flash, yields jump. The safe stuff isn't safe, the spread widens. Margin calls hit the strong and the weak, the prudent and the proud. Phones light up. Liquidity vanishes like breath on glass. A currency slide becomes a debt spiral. Why does this happen? Because the foundation is the same. Trust. When trust thins, Everything accelerates. The government pays more to borrow. Banks pull back. Credit tightens. Businesses stall. People panic. And politics explodes into blame, outrage, and quick fixes that aren't fixes at all. Overnight, the superpower turns into a cautionary tale. One day, you are the reference point. The next day, you are the warning label. The reserve currency becomes a regional currency. The empire becomes a memory. Do you see the pattern? It has happened 3 times in living memory: Spain, Britain, the Soviet Union. Each thought the rules were optional. Each learned the rules were iron. We are running the same play, telling the same lie. This time is different. It rarely is. Since 2020, we sped up. We printed more money. We piled on more debt. We stretched our military promises across more maps. We let our factories rust and our supply chains drift. We sharpened the divide at home. We didn't walk the path. We sprinted. Why? Fear, greed, convenience. Because pushing the pain forward always feels easier than paying it now. As an investor, you know these emotions: fear of missing out, fear of standing alone, greed when the line moves up, panic when it snaps down. You've seen it in markets, you felt it in your gut. Now scale it to a nation. The psychology is the same, the stakes are not. In the early phase, denial pays. The crowd cheers. Every policy that delays consequence feels like genius. Your portfolio rises on fumes. Then the bill arrives, slowly at first, then all at once. The day you realize the currency is not a constant. The moment you see that savings are promises, and promises depend on trust, and trust is the scarcest asset in the world. Politicians will say, calm down. Technologists will say, innovation will save us. Do not misunderstand. Innovation matters, but math beats stories. If output shrinks while obligations swell, the gap gets paid one way: through austerity, through inflation, through default. Pick your poison. The body still absorbs the dose. You cannot wish away 1 through 5 and hope to skip 6 and 7. You cannot ignore cause and then plead with effect. The pattern is merciless because it is mechanical. Overspend, overpromise, debase, fracture. Crisis, reset. Why do we pretend the gears will skip a tooth for us? Maybe we find a way out. Maybe America reforms. Maybe we rebuild capacity. Maybe we tighten belts, reconcile books, and restore trust. Maybe. Hope is not a plan. The pattern says otherwise. The math says otherwise. So, where does this leave you, the investor, the saver, the builder, with 2 disciplines: humility and readiness? Humility to accept that empires are mortal. Readiness to act when the lights flicker. That means watching trust, not talk. Watching real output, not headlines. Watching behavior, not promises. It means remembering that velocity is a character in this story. Things change slowly until they don't. When it comes, it won't be slow, it will be sudden. A currency crisis that triggers a debt crisis that triggers a political crisis. One crack, then a cascade. In one night, the world's reference price is no longer the reference. In 1 week, the unthinkable becomes the new normal. In 1 year, people tell themselves they saw it coming all along. 3 times the world learned this lesson the hard way. The pattern says that we are next. The end is visible if you know what to look for. The path is written, the clock is running, the math is undefeated. History has watched empires die the same way, again and again. The pattern does not ask permission, it arrives, it tests pride, it punishes delay. We are about to learn the lesson the hard way, not in a classroom, in portfolios, in pulse rates at midnight. There is a sequence, steps that repeat. Investors feel it before they see it. Greed whispers, take one more swing. Fear answers, get out now. Then comes denial, then panic. Do you see the rhythm? When we enter stage 6 and stage 7, understanding becomes oxygen. Screens will glow red. Headlines will scream. You will want to know what happened and why, so your hand does not shake on the sell button. The answers are not hiding in the future. They are etched in the past, in the rise, the hubris, the crack, the rush for the exits. We study those marks and we prepare. I will show you where to look.